There we go. What is up? Gotta do a little set on the devices. Should be all good now. Okay. All right. Well, we're back. Been a pretty chill Friday. Been working on stuff, getting some stuff assembled, like some Sentinels. Working on those today. But excited for the stream. We're just gonna focus on our little infantry guys that I'm using as our engineers. So just want to go ahead and like knock those out. We got 15 of these dudes. And last time we were working with the new John Blanche series of paints from Army Painter. Kind of getting our color scheme locked in. So you can see I've got kind of what we built with like the very earthy orange scarf and everything. And I decided to just color code all the squads. So some guys have blue, some guys have white. And I've just been getting them to a point where we can do our washes. And when you know it, I forgot like there's like two dudes that I forgot to paint their boots. So I need to go in and do that real quick. But yeah, we're gonna be working with the Army Painter washes. And seeing if I can get these guys finished tonight. They don't have like a ton of stuff to do. Because we've already engineered a lot of work into our colors with the airbrush. So after we do the washes, I just have like a little bit of cleanup and a couple of highlights here and there. And they will more or less be done. So I'm hoping I can just knock out these engineers, get them ready for the table. Now that the Imperial Guard Codex is active in the app, I can play with lists a lot more. So I've been kind of messing around with that, doing a couple of small changes, which is why I have the Sentinels. Where's the other guy? Other student. One of those is I will be having an infantry squad in the list, so I will need to break out more of our Tallarn guys and paint them up. So I do need to get these guys like finished. And also I have the Sentinels to paint. I think that's everything. At least for the time being. Oh yeah, heavy weapons team. Got to do one of those. Big raid coming in. Kenny, what's up, dude? Welcome, welcome everybody. Rottweiler. What's going on, dude? Yeah, so I will need to break out some more of those, but have not stripped the paint off of those. So I will have to do that before I start painting them, because For people who weren't here last time, I was kind of telling the story of how I got all these at a convention slash swap meet years and years ago, and they're just covered in like old like gloss coat enamel paints and normal uh, paint stripping stuff that we use for models like simple green and hot water. Doesn't really work. Doesn't eat through that stuff. So I have to use this really nasty, like industrial level paint stripper to like get that stuff off of there. So it's a whole process. Sapper Steve, what is going on, dude? I haven't seen you in forever. Working on some knights and armatures, yeah. I was actually thinking about doing some ally stuff with this army. Um, just like the weird thing is that you don't really get a whole lot out of Imperial Knights the way that you do with Chaos Knights. Um, so it's just kind of a weird thing. Like you only have the two variations. You have the Helverin and the Armiger. Um, and I'm gonna think of it. I haven't looked at the Armiger data sheet in a while. I can look it up real quick. Because like the cool thing about Chaos Knights is the War Dogs are like really self-sufficient. They don't really need rules buffs. Oh, didn't mean to add that. What in the world is the datasheet ability? Oh yeah, it's bad. It's really bad. Yeah. So I don't know. I've been tinkering around with stuff. I was kind of looking at the inquisitorial agents, but they don't really get too much for me. All right, so making it a little old school. The army painter washes. So I'm thinking what I want is probably a combination of these two shades. Good, shook up. We've got the warm skin shade and voodoo shade. I'm assuming that these are like repurposed or maybe like a slightly different mixture for the John Blanche line. This one's obviously kind of like a sepia brown color. Bloop, bloop, bloop. And this voodoo paint is kind of like a brownish green. Sure it is. Yeah. Good for like dirty military stuff. Kind of mix those two together. And then it's been so long since I've used the actual Army Painter wash system that I don't have any more of the mixing medium, but I bet we can use some of this the Noosh medium from Procryl. I bet it's gonna work pretty similarly. A couple of drops of that in there, and then we're just gonna mix this up real good with a little bit of water. Seems to be working in a similar fashion. You can see it's like brightening a little bit. So once I get this diluted to where I want, I'm probably going to add a couple of drops of black to it. Let's see. Thankfully, I do have that. It's called Grimdark Shadow. Very cool. A little bit more water in the brush. fluffy brush. Grab one of our here. Just gonna start putting this all over it. You can see that like it's not as thick with that medium in there, and this is more old school style, kind of like the fire and forget wash that most people are used to using. But that doesn't mean I want to just like leave it on here. I do want to kind of move it around and get it nice and spread out, because we don't want any like coffee staining. We're not going to have the training wheels that we usually have with the oil washes. That's pretty good. All I'm going to do is just get a little bit of water in my brush and very gently start moving this around. Just going to add some of that water. Just going to help this flow a little bit more. I don't mind if there's like a color filter on this stuff, but I don't want any like coffee stains. What I mean by that is like big blobs just sitting on flat surfaces. I want the washes to settle into all the details, but I also want like a little bit of transparency to it. So like on the top of his white head wrap here, I want that to be nice and clean. So yeah. Then if you need more, you can always add more. Make sure we got enough shade in the face. And then when this is dry, I can always come back like with some of that black wash by itself to do the gun, just to get more definition in those details. But yeah, that's pretty good. So start setting those off to the side. In fact, take a quick second to set up and platform. We'll just set our guys off in front of the fan. So hopefully by the time I finish applying this, oh Juka, what's up? Been you in a long time. Hopefully by the time I finish applying this to all of our dudes, like the first in the row will be like pretty close to dry. And if you add too much, like don't be afraid to kind of like dry your brush out a little bit and use the capillary action to wick it away. Like if you just get like a bunch of, like a big old blob of it on there and you don't really know what to do with it, don't be afraid to just remove some. Especially once we start diluting it with a little bit of water in our brush to help it move around. You might get some like big old puddles. Just don't leave that there. Like right here. Just wick some of that away. And if we feel we need more, we can come back with some of the pure version of the wash. It's a little bit goopier. And just have it sit in those areas. Use the old spit eraser to clean that top off there. Alright, cool. Probably should have put a paper towel down actually. Or just a little. I'm using like the top of my or the lid of one of my tableware cases as the platform. I'm like, oh, I don't want rings of wash on the clear acrylic. just keep going around looking for little areas. I might need to wick some of that away. Looking pretty good. Get a little. Yeah. Love these old school models. There's so much character to them. Makes me kind of sad that like they haven't made new models for some of the more unique regiments. Even though like the new guardsmen are super nice, look really tight. I just do not have the motivation to like kit bash and sculpt on them and stuff and do all the things needed to turn the new Cadians into Tallarn troopers. I think Pete the Wargamer has a really good video on how to do it, but it's still a lot of work, especially when you're like, well, just to field 3 squads of engineers, that's 15. And then if you're running a more like infantry focused detachment, each squad is 10. Then you have like command squads, heavy weapons teams, like artillery crews, all that. So it's so many infantry, right? That's usually the big like barrier to entry with Imperial Guard. Yeah. And I mean like, or you could, there's so many resources out there now. Like I was considering oh man, I wish I could remember the dude's name. There's an artist that makes STLs, and there's a couple of, I think it's 2 different artists, but there's a couple of really nice like modern scale, modern detail level Tallarn armies that you can print out. And I thought about doing that, but I was like, like the whole reason I bought all this stuff in the first place is because like Tallarn was the Imperial Guard army I always wanted, and I could never have them. And so like I finally got a hold of a bunch, and you know, that might be old, but they have a lot of character. I want to use them. And like people really like seeing those older armies like painted up really well, still on the table. A little bit of a coffee stain there. Let's just wick that away. Yeah, it really can be, especially depending on like how much work you have to do. I think if I remember right, watching that video from Pete the Wargamer, he was talking about how he wanted to use the more like kind of antiquated looking rifles from the new Deathcore Krieg, but even though everything's the same scale, um, the arms for the Deathcore don't line up with the bodies from like the new Cadians. And so it's like, okay, well, there's your first like kind of hiccup is you have to do modifications to like every single one of those to get the arms to line up and fit properly. And then you have to sort of like Tallarnize the rest of the uniform and have like the headscarves and all of that. And it's just like, well, your like time per model becomes so much that it becomes like unfeasible for anything other than like kill team. And one of the things I talked about last time was like, man, I love these old models, not only because they have so much character and like they're really easy to paint. Um, they're all monocast, or most of them are monocast. Some of the sculpts might have like you have to glue an arm on or something, but most of them are monocast. So like my time investment just for getting these ready for paint is very fast. It was really fast because you're like, oh, all I got to do is glue some sand on a base, glue the feet to it, done, like ready for paint. um, these specifically, like I said, I had to strip off all that old crusty paint. So um, my personal time investment for these models is a little bit higher than if I had just gotten them where they're unpainted. Let's see, these blue scarves, I might have to come back with some black wash and hit those. One of the things I hope they do with a new edition of the game is bring back subfaction rules like your regiments and your Space Marine chapters and stuff like that. I've heard uh, I've heard rumblings, echoes in the warp that they are going to bring back like war gear and points and things like that. When it comes to army building. So I'm kind of hoping that like one of the things they do decide to bring back is letting armies be a little bit more unique and bringing back some of the subfaction rules. Yeah, I mean like as far as like regiments getting custom models, Catachin is probably next on the list because they're very popular. Um, but I just kind of miss when like all the regiments had their own rules where you were kind of rewarded for being like my whole army is Australian firstborn and I get this cool thing rather than it's like yeah your whole army is just like mix and match, take whatever units like I don't know. Part of me is like it feels wrong uh tinkering with my list and I'm like some of these are quote unquote Death Corps of Krieg and some of these units are Catachan and some of these units are Cadian and that kind of stuff. And at the end of the day it doesn't really matter just because like you're just paying points for the stat line and putting them in your army and they can look however you want. So it's like a pro and a con at the same time. So the pro is that like you don't have to have everything be one like you're not locked into any one set of rules. But the con is that you're not like rewarded for picking something flavorful. It's just like everything is whatever you want it to be. It would have been pretty cool to have the Tallarn rules and be like, oh yeah, you guys get these like cool rules for being like masters of armored combat. Your tanks can do cool things. Just got 5 more. Yeah, I forgot how easy this was. I mean, like the downside is that it takes a lot longer to dry than the oil wash or like the Mr. Weathering color stuff that we like to use. To my panel liner, like those kinds of things. So I'm hoping that the fan will speed things up. Because that was always the struggle when using this stuff on the stream is it's really easy to apply and the end result looks really nice. Um, but the downside is that it's not super conducive for being like quick and snappy during a live stream. Yeah, it'll be interesting. It's fun to think about, like, kind of hoping that they learn from their mistakes and have new ideas. 10th edition is very popular, so it's kind of a weird thing to uh, what's the word I'm looking. Kind of just to equate it, because there is a lot of people that have kind of put 40k on the back burner or like not played since the end of ninth edition, or like they gave 10th a try and decided they didn't like it. But there's people that have kind of joined the game recently, the new blood, who are fine with it because they don't really know anything else. Um, also kind of like a philosophical difference of opinion about how the game should work. Um, and people are welcome to agree or disagree about it. There's no real like correct objective answer. One of the big complaints with the last edition was like, oh, there's just too many rules. Like, you need to streamline the game. Um, which has always just kind of been a back and forth contested point in the community, even back when I was a kid. Um, just because there are people who the way that their like mental processes work with a strategy game is like I have to know all the rules. And if I don't know all the rules, I don't feel like I'm prepared and I feel like I'm not, able to play the game the way that I want to or at a high level, or they feel like it's too easy for uh like a surprise to happen that they didn't know about. And so they're like, we want less rules and we want the rules to change less often. I'm like, okay, it's a fair opinion to have. Uh, I disagree, um, especially now in like the modern era of 40k, where um, just the overall like etiquette for competitive play is very different. Of like, hey, this is some stuff you should know about my army. I don't want you to feel like gotcha or anything. Like everybody does that before every game, you know. And if they're being sporting, they'll be like, "Hey, maybe you should remember I can do this thing before you like move your models over there or something like that, right?" Um, and so like for me, I really have never been one of those people that's like I have to know everything. I'm like I need to know my stuff, and I am confident enough in my general knowledge of 40k that I can be like, okay, does your stuff do this or does it do that? Like you know, remember the things about each faction that I need to worry about, and then everything else is just kind of like secondary to that. Um, so I really liked Ninth Edition, where every army kind of had their own unique thing, and they could do these cool combos, and there's a lot of flavor to it. I'm like, yeah, keep giving us like new cool stuff. Um, Whereas now a lot of the game feels very samey between factions. There go Matthew. What's going on? I also like the game to feel fresh. So I'm like, yeah, dude, update it constantly. Give me game balance. Balance it out. Change the points. All that good stuff. I think that's like the number one way to keep your game relevant over the lifespan of like an edition or over the course of a year, like a season. Because games that never get updated and like never get new stuff tend to kind of wither on the vine. Yeah, exactly. Need those updates, that like stream of new cool things happening. Um, or yeah, like you do kind of tend to get bored, especially if you only own one army. It's really easy to get bored. I think that's probably the number one reason that a lot of players have like slowed down a lot with this edition, or just like decided to take a break from 40K because of this edition. Is like most people can only afford in time and money to have like one army. I play Dark Angels, like that's my one thing, or like I play, Eldar or whatever it might be. Um, and if your stuff is like, well, the only way for me to like win games consistently is to play this. Like this is the archetype, this is the build. That like the codex has been solved, and like this is the only way. If you don't take this stuff, that army sucks. You know? And if that's not fun, then you're like, what am I even doing, right? Like, why would I keep playing this? And I totally get it. 'Cause I've been there. Like I before before 10th edition, I finished the season as the number two Chaos Space Marine player in the world. And I have literally not played a single game of Chaos Space Marines since the start of 10th edition, because they stripped all the, like, to me, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of people that still play Chaos Space Marines who find it very fun, but to me, they stripped all the flavor and all the fun out of Chaos Space Marines, and I just haven't wanted to play them since. And so it's like, if that was my only army, your only option is like, well, do I spend a ton of time and money investing into like a new faction for this edition that like maybe I don't like, or do you just not play Warhammer for a while? So like what I need to do now is start pulling the models that are mostly dried off, and we're gonna come back with just some of the what is this? Grimdark Shadow. It's Grimdark Shadow Blackwash. see how we looking. Oh yeah, the fan has started drying those off pretty fast. So I'm just gonna bring in this kind of by itself. Just a little bit of moisture in the brush, a little bit of water. And I want to just very carefully get some of this onto things like their rifles. Just to like get those details picked out. Maybe like their dark green army stuff. Let's get some of that black wash in there. That'll be more starkly contrasted than the kind of softer brown wash that we were doing for the all over shade. Also bring a little bit into the faces. This is maybe where I want to get some water and thin that out just a little bit. So the deepest recesses of the face details are picked out. Just like that. Start cycling through these kind of backwards. So these are like the first set that we did. Sometimes you want that like all over wash, but the color is not dark enough for stuff like this. And then because we're not adding any of the medium, we're not going to have any of that medium slowing down the dry time, so this should dry a little bit faster. Especially because I'm putting them right back down in front of the fan. Little bit of black wash in this dude's face. Thin it out slightly. A little bit of moisture in the brush. There we go. It's got a lot of little like low pouches and stuff. I'll use a little bit of wash on its face as well. Okay. Yeah, fan trick is definitely working a lot. Maybe the Noosh medium from Pro Acryl is also maybe a little bit faster drying than the old Army Peener medium. What do they call that stuff? Quick shade wash mixing medium, I think. Oh yeah, these guys probably need to do like a little bit of diluted black wash on these blue bandanas. Get those details shaded in there. once we're done with this, and everything gets dried out nice and good. I personally like to hit the models with a matte varnish. This helps uniform the paint finish. Because sometimes these washes can dry in kind of a weird finish, maybe like a little bit more shiny or dull in places. And so I want to have like a uniform finish when I want to get back to painting. And then also sometimes, because of the dried finish of the washes, a surface might be a little bit harder for paint to stick to. And so by giving them a varnish, it'll help the overall painting process. Maybe. Yeah, there's definitely been a lot of rumors flying around for 11th. I kind of think that we're like locked in for the 3-year ride. But, you know, could be wrong. I kind of hope that I'm wrong. I would definitely like to see a new edition. I would almost, at this point, welcome like another index reset. Just because, like, even if we move to a new edition, a lot of the factions just are going to feel very samey the way they do now. Just like the core rules are going to be slightly different. Maybe they change how some of the USRs work, that kind of thing. Some of the rumors that I've heard have been saying that like 11th is just going to be sort of like a cleanup edition. Which is, you know, it's fine. Maybe they fix, you know, what needs to get fixed. But unless they do stuff where they take some of these detachments and they radically change how they work, I think we're going to be in kind of a similar spot where it's like a lot of these detachments are just sort of like, okay, now your codex is here, so now you get this archetype and that archetype and etc. And so it's like, all right, well, which one is the best archetype? Because so far with the codexes, it's just sort of like this one detachment is the good one, and then you have like 3 or 4 like narrative detachments that are just doo doo. Actually talking about this the other day, and I know it might be kind of a 4-letter word for some people, but I actually think that bringing back faction secondaries would be a nice little injection of lifeblood into the game. And, you know, like the idea of them, so not the way that they ended up being in ninth edition, but the idea of them, I think was a really good idea. Um, the problem was a fumbled implementation where some of them were just untakeably bad, and some of them where you get max points for having a pulse. Just showing up to the table, you're gonna max it. So if they could bring back the faction secondaries, but they're all in sort of that like middle ground of like it's fun to try to accomplish. It gets you a fair amount of points. They're not like auto done super easy. And it gives your faction, like the army you're playing, like some fun flavor. I would be totally in favor of those. I'm gonna give our twos just a little bit longer. Turn the fan up a little bit. Yeah, I mean, like I kind of miss them, right? Like I, the example I like to give is the Red Corsairs one. And the way that it worked was super cool because the Red Corsairs, they're like space pirates. That's their thing. And so their secondary was like you have to go out, you have to take an objective, and you have to hold it. And if you held it for a turn, then you got a token on that unit. They were like, okay, so you held the objective, you get a token. Now your goal is to bring that token back to your deployment zone by the end of the game. Now you got some points if your unit just held it, right? But you got more points if you brought it back to your deployment zone by the end of the game, right? So it was like this really cool thing where you're like, I'm gonna go out, I'm gonna like steal all the goodies from these objectives, I'm gonna steal your shit, and then I'm gonna take it back home, right? And it wasn't easy to do, right? It was like you kind of did the first half by just playing the game, but you still had to be like, okay, now this unit has to survive because if the unit dies, the token goes away, right? So one, you have to survive the game to get any points with that token, and then two, you had to bring it back to your deployment zone to get the most amount of points. And I liked it. It was like this fun little mini game that I got to play in all of my games where I'm like, okay, I have to play Warhammer, like do all the stuff you have to do in normal Warhammer to try to win. But also I get this little mini game where I get to be a space pirate. Like that was super cool. And I never had a single person ever complain about the faction secondary, right? Like, and balance wise, it was great because it's like I had to work for it and my opponent had to work to try to deny it. Because one of the main reasons that some of the faction secondaries were so bad is they were so easy to deny. And so it's like both of us had to be playing the game and like work towards this achievable goal to either gain points or stop points from being gained. And so both of us had agency in doing that. And it was great, you know, but like the ultra competitive talk was like, oh, it's a win more, right? So it's either what you want is one that's like free. You get 30 points for showing up to the table. And then the win more ones were kind of like, these are okay, but they called it win more because you're only really doing them if you're already winning, so you're just winning by a larger margin. I was like, that's like bitch ass talk, you know. I don't like that idea. Yeah, like so some of them were just super easy, right? And it was just like I think it like I'm trying to remember the exact phrasing for some of them, but yeah, it was like exist in three table quarters. Like you nominate these three table quarters and you have to exist into those for Necrons. And it's like, well, I'm just gonna have some like bitch ass scarabs behind a wall while my army is like fighting the fight, and you can never interact with those scarabs. So I just get 30 points. You know, like the Sisters of Battle one was really busted. It was like at first it was like you nominate objectives, and if you hold those objectives, you just get points. And of course, the player is going to be like, well, of course, I'm going to pick the three, like my home field and the two objectives it's easiest for me to control over the course of the game. Um, the Space Marine one was pretty easy, stuff like that. It's like, eh. So yeah, like there was like happy middle grounds, and I think if they just learned from their mistakes of that, they could implement them in a really healthy way that would revitalize like army, the reason that people play their armies or like build certain lists. And I miss where ninth edition was like less about taking the objectively best data sheets in your army, because you really only have one way to hit your win condition with these detachments. So it's like if you pick this detachment, it only works with certain stuff, right? Like I'm building an Imperial Guard army, knowing full well that like I'm playing Hammer of the Emperor detachment, and it only affects squadron units. So if you don't have the squadron keyword, none of the rules work for you. And you only have like orders as your general army rule. And so it's like cool. I understand that it's like I'm being limited, but I get to play tanks, and that makes me happy. So it's like, eh. But in ninth edition, you could be like, okay, well, I could play Black Legion, and I'm not really being rewarded or punished for taking certain units in Black Legion. I just get this like suite of stratagems and this army rule, and I can kind of do whatever I want. I can create my own little win conditions with this, right? Like, there was that period of time in ninth edition where, yeah, Space Marine still had an eighth edition codex, and so Kenny and I found this thing you could do where there was a stratagem called like Let the Galaxy Burn, and you played it, and it was 3 CP, right? This is back where like you would generate CP for taking a specific detachment in the Force Org, and like you could get a lot more CP. So the stratagem cost 3 CP, and what it did is if any one model from my army touched an objective, I don't care how many models you have on the objective, I steal the objective. It's mine, right? And depending on the turn order or when you played it, right? Because you played it at the top of the battle round, regardless if you're at the top or the bottom of when your player turn is happening. Um, and so like we engineered this list where it's like, okay, you have to have Abaddon. He's going to help generate CP, and like you take this very specific attachment, and that nets you a certain amount of CP at the start of the game. So it's like we figured out that we could do this 3 to 4 out of the 5 turns of the game. I could play Let the Galaxy Burn, right? And the whole army was like, okay, I'm gonna swarm with cultists and demon engines. So like if I play the stratagem and one cultist touches an objective, I don't care if you have a Bane Blade on it, like that objective is mine now, right? And the demon engines, which could move really fast, and we actually played Helldrakes. Like Helldrakes were dog water. They were so bad. But they could move really far, and they're this like kind of hard to kill demon engine. And so I could do things like turn one, I would play Let the Galaxy Burn and zoom a Helldrake and steal your home objective. And so like you just didn't have a home objective for like the first turn of the game. And if you can't like turn around and kill that Helldrake, you're not going to get that home objective for the second turn either, because I'm just going to play it again. And so it was this like crazy wild thing where like I didn't really kill anything, and I wasn't really all of that tough. It was just kind of like raw stat lines. But I could play this and just be like, I'm gonna snake you on primary for this entire game. Like you get 0 points. And that was my win condition. Like it was crazy. And it worked. Like did like top 10 at the Frontline Gaming New Orleans GT the year that we played it, right? It did really well. Oh, I mean, it's 100% what it's gonna be, dude. Like we already saw with the Eldari Codex. Like that's what they're doing for codexes. It's like you get buffs this type of unit, buffs that type of unit, like maybe an uppy downy detachment, maybe one like kind of flavor one. You know, like that's just what we're gonna get. That's the sandwiches we have to eat for the rest of 10th edition. So here. So now what I need to do is get a nice varnish on these guys. I mean, right now it's kind of cool. I guess it kind of depends on like what the codex holds. So varnish in the airbrush. Gonna get a 13s here. Yeah, looking pretty good. This stuff dries really fast, so I shouldn't need to set them in front of the fan. Also, doing multiple coats of varnish throughout the painting process is really, really good for these because they are metal. So I want to be able to have these as game pieces and really protect the paint so it doesn't chip or scratch off. So a little bit more work than my typical plastic model workup because it's like, okay, I'm gonna prime, then I'm gonna varnish, then I'm gonna base coat, my airbrush workup, then I'm gonna varnish, right? Then I'm gonna paint all my other stuff. Throw a wash on there, then I'm gonna varnish. So we're just kind of engineering all these layers of protection to paint so it doesn't chip. Oh yeah, dude, these are OG. These are the metal ones. You know, worst case scenario, I could put all my Tallarn troopers in a sock and beat somebody with it. I mean, you can get recasts of them online these days in resin, but I bought all of these like in person at a convention slash swap meet years ago. Dude was like, had this huge lot of Tallarn stuff. Um, and I was like, "How much you want for this stuff?" And he was like, "I'm selling the infantry for like $1 a model." And he had a bunch of vehicles, but I didn't want them. Um, I was like, I probably want more modern versions of the vehicles or like do alternative sculpts from like an STL or whatever. Because I hate how the Lehman Rust looks. I think it's so dumb. Um, and so I was like, I just want the infantry, and so I bought like 90 of these like basic infantry dudes, and then like 3, 6, 9, 12, like 15 heavy weapons teams. So I have a whole bunch of these guys that are just kind of uh, like rebased and have like a desert khaki base coat that I did with the airbrush years ago. Um, and then all the heavy weapon teams and stuff I never got around to stripping. So because I decided to add some to my list, I'm gonna have to go in and um, strip those out. Yeah, some of the Eldar stuff is really old and crusty. For the Eldar that I'm doing, I only bought vehicles and the new characters. Oh wait, no, I bought Striking Scorpions a while back, and I got the new Warp Spiders. Uh, but for a lot of this stuff, that's like old, I bought from either RTLW or I got or I printed myself. Just because like, I know that I want to run Dire Avengers and I don't want the 20-year-old sculpts, so I got the Dire Avengers from RTL. Um they also look like Exodites, which is what all my Elder stuff is. And for things like the Dark Reapers, um I printed those. And I got the Swooping Hawks from Artel because they look really cool. Really nice. Um, and the Guardians, I know the Guardians got a new kit, but they kind of look the same. So I found these, um, printed those out for my Guardians. A bit nicer, a little bit larger in scale. And I bought their version of Fuegan way back when I was making all my Inari stuff. So I was like, oh, now I can run Fuegan. So I just didn't need to buy the new one. But I did get the new Eldrad. I got the new what's her name? Lycus. Got her. I think Artel existing at influence. No. Games Workshop doesn't really care about shit like that. Like they don't, that's not really on their radar because like they're so big. It's kind of like asking if a great white shark cares that there's like a goldfish swimming next to it. You know, like they don't. It's not. They don't even know it's there probably. So let's get to work. I'll line these guys up in our little assembly line based on squad. I want to go back and do like some really quick cleanup slash highlights. Um, so I know I want some, a little bit of drab brown, a little bit of khaki, kind of like a 50-50. to like play with our color combo a little bit. So one thing you always want to do if you're using a wash like this is you want to use exactly the same color that was underneath the wash beforehand, or only go very slightly brighter, because if you go too bright, it's where you get kind of like those like Tron highlights that look a little off. So I don't want to go much brighter than the color that was already there. I want to make sure this is nice and thin so that it kind of fades and mutes out as it dries. Okay. So see how we have like kind of the same color that we started with, but now we have that really nice shading going on. Out a what light umber? Where is it? Can we start with? If I mess up, I can always come back with a little bit of similar color to our shade. In this case, dark golden brown. Get that nice and thin. So like I got a little brush stroke right here. I can just come back and kind of glaze that in. Helps if you don't have very much paint in your brush. Let's get those little highlights back. Sketch all that back in. And I'm leaving a lot of this still shaded. I don't want to block out our airbrushing or our nice soft gradient. See that shading created by our washes. So I'm not really doing the GW style, but I am still painting in kind of like the old school way. So I'm not going to be edge highlighting every little detail, right? Especially for these soft shapes like the cloth. There's no reason to. You can see this is why I was saying, like, you don't want to go too bright after this wash. Now, if you really want to add more and like actually add more highlights after this step, then that would be the time to do it. Right now, we're just kind of refreshing our airbrush highlights that are already there, removing any staining or dirtiness from those brightest zones that may have happened from the wash. Just hitting brightest areas, clean those up. Really making all these nice details sculpted. These little tunic pop out. And a little highlight like this is probably as much work as I'm going to do to the various components in these models, because I mean, like, at the end of the day, these guys are toughness 3 guardsmen, so got to do a lot of them, so we have to be efficient with our time, and you know, they die really fast, so that's one of the ways that I engineer efficiency into how I paint armies, is like, how long is this going to be on the table? And so the less time that something's going to spend on the table, typically the less work I'll put into like the fit and finish steps past battle ready. Be tedious on this many guys. Go a little bit longer just so I can finish this step. And that's basically quitting time for us. Already put in about 5 hours of work for the streams. I'm getting pretty worn out. Decided not to go to a little tournament tomorrow. Just because after some initial testing, I realized some of the choices in the army list were not going to work, and I didn't want to go any deeper into working on those models. And I'm going to have to get some more stuff ready, like the infantry squad and the heavy weapons team and the sentinels. I was like, there's just too much to do with not enough time. And it's just like I think there was only going to be like 6 or 8 people at that event, and there's also a hockey game tomorrow that I'm going to. I was like, I'm probably going to have to like ditch the last round anyways to go to this game, so let's not go. Catch the next one. And a little bit of texture as I'm doing these highlights. Get a little bit of that cloth texture. Jimmy Norris, what's up, dude? So these 15 I'm gonna run as engineers, the combat engineer squads. And for the basic infantry, probably just gonna use more of my Tallarn infantry, but just color code them the way I have here. That should be alright. My kind of like sit on the home squad of dudes is Cadians, just because they, uh, they make the objective sticky, so that's their job. And then the heavy weapon teams are also gonna be like League on the data sheet, but I'll be using Tallarn heavy weapons teams because that's what I have. Already starting to look really good. Just that little cleanup, so I'm gonna have to keep working on these, of course, the weekend. I don't know. Might do like a little cheeky Saturday stream if I'm feeling up to it. We'll see. I might want to just like kind of put my head down and bang these out so I can get them done. Especially considering that I have to do 10 more now and the 3 heavy weapons teams. Or I might just maybe I just make their uniforms like a slightly different color scheme. I don't know. But yeah, I'm really liking it. It's fun to kind of go back and paint in the old school style on these miniatures, like really get back in touch with that style of painting with like the army painter washes and everything. So they're still pseudo in the hot garbage phase. Once I go in and kind of do that cleanup highlight on the various components, they'll really tighten that focus in on all the details. Will look a lot cleaner. Um, but yeah, I'm really liking how they're coming out. Let's see, oh, I missed some messages. I do like the Rogaldorn. In fact, I have 3 of them in my. They're very cool. Um, Wolfsark hasn't been in a while. I did like a pretty hefty conversion on one of the Rogaldorns. Ah, period. So this is my Dorn tank commander that has been like heavily converted to be like a self-propelled gun tank destroyer, and the old boy Al Rahim is up in there as the tank commander, and kind of like these guys, I still need to go back and do some finishing work on these tanks. They're not totally done yet. Like I need to go back and do a couple of little cleanup highlights in a few areas and add some stuff like carbon scoring on the barrels of stuff, but pretty close to being totally finished. It's kind of the other reason that I decided to not go to the RTT is because like all the tanks are in sort of like a 95% finished state, and I want to get it all knocked out. I want to get it finished. Okay, somebody else asked me this, but yeah, that Al Rahim is a he's a recast. So I didn't destroy a pristine metal Al Rahim model to do that. I do have the actual metal one still, but I got stuff like this for specifically things like that. Like if I wanted um, like artillery crew members or casualties or like guys up on tanks or something, like I got some plastic ones that I'm not afraid to destroy. All right, that's quitting time for me. So let's find somebody to raid. Who's out there painting stuff? 24-hour painting challenge. See, that could be fun. Let's read artwork by Boneless. Never seen this person, never rated them, but let's go check out their painting challenge. Start this raid up. All right, so I'll be back on Tuesday. Maybe if very iffy if I decide to do a stream tomorrow, but keep an eye out for your notifications in case I do. So start this up and see you guys next time.